communities and emergency managers' decisions. So where have improvements in science and technology taken us? Thanks to advances in radar, instrumentation such as dropsondes and steep frequency microwave radiometers, and numerical weather models, today's 5-day track forecast for hurricanes is as good as the 3-day track forecast was a decade ago. This year, the forecast for Irene was spot on, and I'm going to run that again for you. As Irene headed toward land, our forecasts indicated that Florida, coastal Georgia, and South Carolina were not in her path. Forecasters accurately predicted both the initial landfall in North Carolina as well as a second landfall along New Jersey and Long Island. As part of our efforts to do proper economic valuation of our forecasts, we produced a track forecast for Irene based on methods used in 2001 to predict hurricane tracks. This track for 2001 is shown on the right. Now, of course, in 2001, we were only making 3-day advanced hurricane forecasts, not the 5 that we do today. This slide shows what the forecast for Hurricane Irene would have looked like 10 years ago compared to today. On the left, you see the 2011 actual forecast track and the cone of uncertainty that was issued on Tuesday, August 23rd at 11 p.m. in 2011. At that time, there were 68 million people in Irene's forecast path in 2011. Compare this to the number of people that would have been in harm's way in 2001 using the technologies that we had in 2001. So I mentioned 68 million in 2011. In 2001, it would have been 93 million. And as Craig Fugate noted, had we had 2001 track forecast for Irene, we would have had to evacuate the entire east coast of Florida, and that was not necessary because of the improvements in accuracy. So clearly we've made impressive progress in improving track forecasts. However, we've not improved the intensity forecasts. The graph on the left shows improvements in track from 1970 to 2007, and the graph on the right shows a glaring lack of improvement in intensity error since 1990. The Hurricane Forecast Improvement Project is looking to continue to improve the accuracy and reliability of hurricane track and intensity forecasts, extending lead times for hurricane forecasts with increased certainty, and increasing confidence in hurricane forecasts. Let's switch from hurricanes to tornadoes and take a look at how we've done with improvements in forecasting tornadoes. This slide shows the number of deaths per million people in the United States since 1875. From roughly 1925 to 1980s, 90s, the number of deaths per million significantly declined. The decline is due to a number of factors: better forecasts, radio communications, improvement in the construction of homes, etc. A 40% decrease in mortality has been attributed to use of Doppler radar. From 1980s and 90s to the present, the number of deaths per million has leveled off. Now, noticeably, 2011 stands out. It is an anomaly here. It is an exception to this trend. You'd have to go back 100 years to see similar numbers that we saw this last year, 1.8 deaths per million people. When we look more closely at the human dimensions, we see some alarming statistics. People living in mobile homes, which are the solid squares on here, have a far greater death toll than those who live in permanent homes that are the open squares. This is despite the fact that in 2000, only about 7.5% of the population lived in mobile homes. In 1975, roughly 2% lived in mobile homes. People living in mobile homes today are just as vulnerable as people were pre-1925 in the United States. One of the things we typically do is a service assessment to evaluate how well we did during different disasters. The service assessments from the April 25 to 28 outbreak of tornadoes in the southeast and the May 22nd Joplin tornado tell us that too many people still lost their lives or sustained injuries despite the lead times of 17 minutes or more. On April 25 through 28, 2011, tornadoes wreaked havoc across the southeast. The deadliest part of the outbreak occurred during the afternoon and evening hours of April 27, with 122 tornadoes, resulting in 316 deaths across central and south Mississippi, central and northern Alabama, eastern Tennessee, southwestern Virginia, and northern Georgia. On May 22nd, an EF5 tornado struck the Joplin, Missouri area, resulting in over 150 fatalities and more than 1,000 injured. Even the best weather forecasts don't always produce the results we need. In Joplin, the National Weather Service issued outlooks 48 hours in advance and warnings 17 minutes before touchdown. Overall, forecast offices did reasonably well. Pre-season preparedness, pre-event planning and staffing, decision support activities, overall situational awareness, and lead time. Tuscaloosa was advised 5 days in advance based on polar satellite images, and then again 3 days out, National Weather Service intensified the language of the advisements. In Joplin, the population decreases appreciably over the weekends, and May 22nd tornado hit Joplin on a Sunday. Though Joplin is in Tornado Alley, it's typically spared. However, despite these warnings, despite the lower population numbers that were out and about in Joplin, many lives were lost and the human impact was great. The weather assessments, the service assessments for these events bring home a number of key messages that we need to take to heart. There had been desensitization to sirens and warnings. Warnings sort of lost credibility. There was confusion over multiple warnings. People said, sirens go off all the time. Why should I pay attention to this one? There's also a lot of confusion about where the warning areas were. Am I in a warning area or not? People didn't know how to evaluate their risk. Shall I wait until I actually see a funnel cloud before I take action? Or should I do something as soon as I hear a siren? It's clear that warning messages need to be easily understood by the public, and in many cases they have not been. If we are to expect good decision-making, people need to have information they can act on and trust. Despite the popularity of social media and text messaging, the service assessment says that Weather Service has not taken full advantage of this capability. Ultimately, our job is to reduce fatalities and damages. How can we do a better job of accomplishing that goal? Doing so requires advances on many fronts. We need to continue to invest in research so that we can understand the factors that are conducive to, for example, tornado formation. On the hurricane front, we also need more research on what causes hurricanes to intensify. We also need technology, such as dual pole, and not just new technology, but technology that we can adapt and mainstream. But a big new area that we must embrace quickly and fully is social science research. And this brings us to our concept, our initiative of the Weather Ready Nation. The frequency or intensity of extreme weather events will likely increase in the future. NOAA recognizes the risk this places on America's families, communities, and businesses. Therefore, in July, NOAA launched the Weather Ready Nation, a comprehensive initiative. This Weather Ready Nation initiative is about making America safer by saving more lives and protecting livelihoods as communities across the country become increasingly vulnerable to severe weather events. NOAA's Weather Ready Nation end goal is to help people make better decisions with better information. Our job is not done once forecasts or warnings are issued. Our success is not based solely on metrics of accuracy or lead time. Success depends on understanding and addressing the human dimensions of response. Success means building resilience to weather-related events. We can't do this alone. We need partners and other agencies across all levels of government, emergency managers, researchers, the media, insurance industries, nonprofits, and more to work with us to achieve the vision. Weather Ready Nation strategically aligns resources within NOAA and beyond. We need a nation that's ready, responsive, and resilient to extreme events. A key part of the Weather Ready Nation initiative is a national dialogue with the top experts, key stakeholders, and America's weather enterprise. The history at NOAA, as it relates to social science, is that we often tap social scientists late in the game when criteria are already set, the problems are already defined, the approaches are already articulated. In contrast to the way we have done this in the past, social science is being incorporated from the outset in the Weather Ready Nation initiative. The purpose of the dialogue is to examine what we know and what we can do in the short and long term to improve the nation's severe weather forecasts and warnings and community preparedness. So what does this dialogue look like? We had one in Norman on December 13th to 15th. The focus at Norman, Oklahoma was improving resiliency to severe weather with a special eye toward tornadoes. The purpose was to initiate a national conversation among the users, service, and science communities, both physical and social sciences, including key stakeholders and America's weather enterprise. The goal was to identify, to prioritize, and to set in motion actions to improve the nation's resiliency against severe weather, especially tornadoes, to protect lives and property. Nearly 180 participants from academia, social science, media, private sector, emergency management, community leaders from all over the U.S., including folks from Joplin and Tuscaloosa, who saw firsthand the devastation caused by the spring tornadoes in their area. From Joplin, emergency manager Keith Stammer attended, as did Ken Horst of Tuscaloosa's Fire and Rescue Services. At the symposium, NOAA heard loudly and clearly the value of integrating social science methodologies and concepts from the very beginning of all that it does. The word cloud that you see on this slide here comes from over 50 pages of notes taken at the December 13th to 15th symposium in Norman. The more often a word was used in the notes, the bigger the font. More specifically, we must engage the social science community from the beginning as partners and not as an afterthought. Some of the priorities that came out of the Norman Symposium include bringing corporate America into the conversation, including the risk management community, honing in on basic and applied research questions. Fully integrating the social science community with the weather and climate communities means a significant and a sustained commitment. We must share in this commitment both the human capital and the dollars across government agencies. This is not something that NOAA can do alone. We must commit to collaborating across disciplines. We must develop mutual understanding and respect for each other's expertise, and we must identify and address the gaps in knowledge and tools. Now is the time for us to act as a cohesive Weather Ready Nation community to tackle these problems. Now is the time to invest in understanding just how it is that people interact with weather, how their understanding, their perceptions, their uses, their experiences, their environment, and their culture all intersect with weather. How committed is NOAA to integrating social sciences into our Weather Ready Nation initiative? Our commitment starts with the Coastal Environmental Impact Decision Support Services in New Orleans.